We're gonna need to build movable Lego bridges, and I've come up with 6 different ways to do this. This video is sponsored by Crossout. More on them later. First, I want to make a drawbridge, so I made 2 sections of road that will lift up and pivot at the base. I tried making these supports and using these pieces, but the end of the bridge gets in the way of the swinging movement of the mobile section of the bridge. I tried multiple solutions that didn't work since the pivot point was in the wrong place, but eventually moved these pieces to the top, which works because there are no further points than the top of this round part, so there's nothing to catch. We're also going to need 2 sets of columns on each side of the bridge, which I'll connect up using plates. Otherwise, the weight of the bridge sections would definitely tip each tower over. At the top, I used these worm gear housings, which at this point are pretty much a staple of every build I make. I use these long axles to drive 2 different pulleys on each side, which will lift up the bridge sections and lower them down. Okay, that works really well and looks super cool, but I need it to be able to support the weight of a car. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna need to add a support to go underneath the seam of the 2 bridges, which works perfectly. Now, let's see if it can all work together. Okay, bridge panels are up, that's a good start. Now we can send the boat through, which I made using a double hull design and 2 outboard motors which don't mount to much speed, but it gets the job done. Then I can lower the drawbridge again. And let the G-Wagon pass. It's very hard to steer if you couldn't tell by my horrible driving. Wow, that's really cool to watch. Oh, and my race to 1 mil by the end of 2025 is in full swing, so if you want to help me out, don't forget to click the button. Thanks. By the way, since literally half the comments on my last video were just asking for a tutorial on how to make this motorized Lego G-Wagon, I've made a follow-along video on my second channel as well as free PDF instructions that you can download. I'll also link the required circuit cubes kit with a discount code below so that you can get 10% off your purchase. Okay, that's the first bridge done. Now let's move on to another bridge, a swing bridge. It'll be pretty simple to make. I need to raise up the road so it doesn't hit the sides, so I added these ramp pieces. Then in the middle underneath it, I'll add a support column which will house the mechanism required to make it spin. It doesn't give me much room to work with though, since it needs to be above the water level so the motors don't get wet, but below the bottom of the bridge. But using a motor on its side and you guessed it, worm gear housing, I managed to fit everything in. The tricky part was making it all balanced and actually spin without catching on the stationary parts of the bridge. I tried many different solutions like slopes to get the bridge to slide into place, but eventually after a lot of annoyance, I settled on these slopes connected to the moving part of the bridge as well as some on the inside of the unmoving bridge parts. So hopefully it all works. Okay, yes, it opened without problem. And thank goodness, it actually managed to close without breaking. I was definitely crossing my fingers for that. This video is sponsored by Crossout, an online vehicle shooter game. Crossout features one of my favorite art styles as it's set in a post-apocalyptic future, and you can craft your own personal combat vehicles from scratch and use them to engage in fast-paced PvP and PvE. There are thousands of unique parts, weapons, and pieces of equipment to customize your vehicle if you gain the trust of one of the 10 in-game factions, like the militaristic Steppenwolves or the fittingly named Lunatics. Crossout has a very low level of entry, and it only takes a few minutes to get your first vehicle crafted and ready for battle. Okay, now I want to build a table bridge, which is going to be a bit more complex. I have these lead screw pieces that can slide the housing up and down, so I think if I build an assembly in each corner, it could work pretty well. I don't want 4 motors to be required to power this, so along the bottom of the river, I built a Technic frame that holds the lead screws, each with a gear at the bottom that can be chain driven. That way, I only need to use 2 motors. Plus, there's the added benefit that each side can be adjusted separately, so if it ever gets out of sync, which it did many times, it's a perfect fix, which on first test proved to be fairly smooth and kind of satisfying at how fast it moved. Okay, It did get kind of messed up during the test, but other than that, it actually worked very smoothly.
Some of the coolest features of Crossout include an advanced damage model which allows you to shoot off individual parts of your enemy's vehicles, like clipping their wings or shooting their tires. Another important feature is that the game will only match you up against others with similarly powered vehicles, so you can focus on just destroying the in-game enemies and not your controller against the wall. There is also a public market where you can buy and sell parts and loot. Most importantly to me though, is the amazing setting of the game, which is inspired by Mad Max. There are many environments to find yourself in: toxic factory ruins, vast desert plains, and narrow streets winding through abandoned cities. Crossout is also free to play on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox, so you can sign up using the link in the description or pinned comment.
Where if you're playing on PC, you'll get a massive bonus pack with special parts and paint. The next bridge is a tilt bridge, and as soon as I started thinking of how I was going to make this work, I realized it was going to be pretty difficult. First, I built 2 long Technic beams branching out from the ends of the moving portion of the bridge. Then, where they overlap the edge of the table, I built 2 pivot points using these round pieces and inverted slopes, all locked in with a frame around them so they can't just slide side to side. But that was the easy part. In order to actually lift the bridge, I built this pulley system using worm gear housings, and more tiny motors, which drive this axle and spool of string. I can loop the string around these pulleys, then when they turn the motor, winding up the spool, it will slowly pull this beam down and lift the bridge up. I duplicated the build, and then for the final piece of the solution, I tied a string around the assemblies and threw these little holes in the legs of my tables, which will keep the motors and pulleys at a set height. And obviously, since my table won't be going anywhere, the only thing that can move is the bridge. Okay, this really needs to work. Wow, I was not very optimistic, but it actually worked. It looks pretty cool, although this isn't as realistic of a mechanism compared to the rest. Next, I want to make a vertical lift bridge, which I decided to make a train bridge since that's what they normally are in real life. First, I built support structures on either side of the bridge, which will distribute the weight of the moving section. At first, I tried using a string and pulleys with a counterweight, but in order to make the counterweight actually heavy enough to make a difference, it would have to be way too big. And since the bridge section isn't really that heavy, I settled on using chain links since they won't slip on a pulley, but rather be locked in place. The motor assemblies I used to make the tilt bridge actually work perfectly here too, and in order to fasten the end of the chain to the bridge, I use these tread versions that clip into the underside of plates, which will hopefully be strong enough to hold the entire bridge. Then under the supports, I added some Technic beams that I was originally going to add some weight to, but I decided to test without first. And besides the chain snapping at the connection points, it had enough torque to lift it. But all I had to do to fix the snapping problem was changing the way the tread links faced, and adding this extra strip of chain on each side, which probably doesn't really do anything, but oh well. Okay, time to test it. That's honestly really cool to watch. And finally, we have just one bridge left, a transporter bridge. I'm gonna work smarter and not harder and reuse the already existing frame of the vertical lift bridge, but I do need to take everything else off. Then I'll build 2 Technic beams that span the gap in between each support. On top of that, I'll lay down a line of gear racks, which will be how the transporter part of the bridge will move back and forth. Then I'll take the road plate and add a beam in each corner and connect one side yet again to a worm gear housing and a small motor. Then the other 2 I can just have free spinning gears. Okay, well it definitely works, but the 2 non-driver gears are kind of lagging behind, but that's a simple fix. I'll just add these 2 diagonal beams which will lock them in and stop any flex. Okay, let's see if it will carry the car. Let's go. That was actually really cool, albeit really slow, but to be honest, that's more realistic.
Thanks again to Crossout for sponsoring this video. Make sure you use the link in the description or pinned comment to download the game for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox.
And if you're playing on PC, claim your massive bonus pack with special parts and paint. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to find out how you can motorize your own LEGO G-Wagon. The video explaining everything is linked below. Bye!